Welcome back from lunch, and we are at the last session of the day with content. We're so excited. We are going to hear in this session from you, from some of you. So I want to particularly thank all of those of you who raised your hand and said yes to this session as presenters. I want to thank everybody in the room in advance, including the virtual room, for the discussion-rich part of the session this is going to entail, because you're going to have to turn your brains back on after lunch and get ready to participate. And I want to thank Dennis Nangle, who wrangled all of this. There's a lot of moving parts with this one. So I'm going to call Dennis up to get us started, and here we go.
I'm here on time after lunch, unlike last year, so it's very exciting. Yes, so I'm very excited for this session. I've seen what the states have put together, and I think it's really gonna inspire a lot of conversation. I'm going to go over how the structure of it will work, and then I'll call the first set of states up in a moment. Yes, so let's just one thing at a time. So the structure will be, we have 3 different topics that we're going to be discussing and presenting on. Each topic will consist of 15 minutes of presentation time, and then after that, there'll be time for you all to discuss at your tables. And then after that 7 minutes is over, we'll spend 7 minutes with some sharing of what the discussion was about, certain impressions, maybe questions you may have for the lightning talk presenters. And we won't have time for each table to share out, so just kind of like as the spirit leads you to bring up some things and share some stuff, please do. And then I know you just got settled in your tables after lunch, but if they're an attempt to make the discussion robust, and we also have a couple of volunteer discussion leaders, if you have empty space at your table, kind of joining another like half completed table to try to consolidate some of the seating, that would be great. And then the discussion leaders, raise your hands. You guys, once everybody is settled into their tables, you can disperse and find a table to own for the discussion. So that's a lot of information. But while I bring up Arizona and Rhode Island, if you have a rather lean table and you want to join another table to make it more consolidated, that would be great. Please welcome Nicolette and Chris to talk about artificial intelligence. Yay! I'll be the slide advancer for all of you.
Okay. All right. So, greetings all. In case you don't know who I am Chris Guerra, LSTA coordinator, SDC, and project specialist for the Arizona State Library. And thank you. I'm proud too. Yeah. Woo! It's warm in our state, in case you want that. And the following presentation I'm about to give is written by AI.
No.
Or was it? And would you know? Next slide. Okay. So AI has once again entered our public consciousness, as it has a number of times in the past 70 years, since Alan Turing first presented his framework for developing intelligent machines, as well as how to test their intelligence in 1950. But while most people have a sense of what AI means in general, there is so much that fits under this umbrella that it can be hard to know what we should focus on. Next slide. So fortunately, one approach we can take is to focus on the type that's brought it back to the forefront of our thoughts, namely generative AI. That is artificial intelligence that uses machine learning models, machine learning being a type of technology where computers learn from data and improve at tasks over time without being explicitly programmed for every step, and natural language processing, or NLP, which helps computers work with and understand human language to create new content. So this can include pretty much any kind of content, right? It can include text, images, audio, video. And this is in contrast to, for example, like predictive AI, which uses patterns and data to make educated guesses about future events or outcomes, like predicting what the weather will be like, or if the text message you're receiving is spam or legitimate, or what to recommend to you on your Netflix. Next. Now, within the sphere of generative AI are several popular products you've likely heard about, like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, formerly known as Bard, DALL-E, and Midjourney, as well as some you may not have heard about, like Stable Diffusion and Synthesia. And with these tools comes a whole host of possibilities and concerns. And probably the most notable concern you've heard about relates to the very underlying foundation that enables generative AI to even exist, namely being trained with content that these companies may not legally, or at the very least ethically, have the right to use. So for example, ChatGPT, while we don't know all the specifics of their training data, did use Common Crawl, capital C's, which is a large open access data set that collects and stores web pages from all across the internet, and that absolutely includes user-generated content. So what this means for libraries is that there are some very specific sets of related factors that we need to consider, as they're going to have a direct impact on the resources and services that we typically offer. These include, and I apologize I don't have a slide for this, but I'm happy to send it out after the fact. Accuracy and reliability. So AI models, while sophisticated, are not infallible and can potentially generate responses that are inaccurate or misleading. And this, of course, can be due to limitations in the model's training data or misunderstanding of more complicated questions. You've got data privacy and security. So libraries, obviously, have a responsibility to protect patron data, which includes interactions with these AI systems. There is bias and ethical considerations, because AI models can exhibit bias that is present in their training data, which can lead to skewed or unfair responses. Misinformation and content appropriateness. So AI-generated content has the potential to inadvertently spread misinformation or inappropriate content. This is an obvious concern for libraries, which are trusted sources of information. Dependency and skill erosion. So there can be an over-reliance on AI for information retrieval and content generation that could lead to a decline in traditional research and critical thinking skills. And this is something that I have seen firsthand. Digital literacy and user understanding. So not every library patron is going to be familiar with AI and how it works. There's an obvious and well-documented gap in digital literacy, which can lead to misunderstandings or misuse of these AI tools. Big one here, intellectual property and copyright. So AI-generated content, particularly summaries or creative writing, can raise a lot of questions about who owns or who has the copyright or the IP for that particular content. There's long-term viability and support. AI technology is moving fast, and that means that tools and platforms can quickly become outdated. I've done tons of presentations on AI, and every single one is different because it's just changed that quickly. And then last but not least, cultural sensitivity. So libraries do serve diverse communities, and it's important that the tools we use are sensitive to that diversity. Next slide. But it is not all doom and gloom. There are clearly a ton of potential use cases for this type of AI, which is why so many companies are using the term AI as like a rallying cry for investors. They see its ability to, at least appear to, be able to problem solve and create new and meaningful content, making them ideal for performing tasks that are traditionally done by people. So within libraries, some of those potential use case scenarios can include accessibility support, which could enhance library resources for individuals with disabilities by providing tools like speech-to-text, audio content, and accessible formats. Automated reference assistance to help answer patron questions, which would free up the librarians to handle more complex tasks. Content creation, like generating book summaries, crafting newsletters, or creating educational materials. Genealogy and historical research, by which it can analyze databases of historical records, making it easier for patrons to trace family histories. Health information and resources, such as offering patrons guidance on where to find relevant medical information. Interactive storytelling and learning experiences for younger audiences. As a language translation tool, it can help break down language barriers and enable more inclusive access to information. I have found ChatGPT and others to be a much better translating service than like Google Translate. Personalized reading recommendations based on a patron's reading history or preferences. Research assistant by analyzing and summarizing targeted information. And finally, virtual learning and tutoring by offering patrons personalized, on-demand learning experiences that are tailored to their specific educational needs. And of course, in many ways, that's just the very tip of the iceberg. Next slide. So the question then is, what exactly should libraries be focusing on right now when it comes to generative AI? And I think the answer is that your role in the library may be something you want to consider when making that decision. Now, there are, of course, very general focal areas that everyone should at least spend a little bit of time learning about, like the history of AI, the terminology, and the available tools. And of course, if possible, take some time out to test some of the more popular products on the market. ChatGPT is free to use. But how generative AI might impact archival work might not necessarily be what's impactful to, say, a youth librarian, right? So here are just a few examples I've come up with. So for archivists, concerns like accuracy and historical context and preservation challenges are key, along with ensuring ethical curation of AI-generated materials. Library administrators can focus on budget and cost management while also navigating policy and regulation compliance and strategically implementing those AI tools in their libraries. On the technical side, library media technicians can be tasked with integrating new technologies, providing ongoing support, and developing staff training programs. Outreach coordinators can play a critical role in maintaining community trust by addressing the digital divide and ensuring that ethical communication about AI use. Programming librarians can focus on keeping program integrity intact while engaging their audiences with content tailored to their needs. Reference librarians may encounter concerns about the accuracy of AI-generated information, the diminished role of human expertise, and the potential for patron misinformation. And then finally, youth librarians may need to assess the appropriateness of AI content, its impact on learning and creativity, and address parental concerns about its use with younger audiences. Next slide. So that's a lot of pieces in a very short period of time with no unfortunate real depth to this, just due to the nature of this program. But I think if I would say there's one thing I want you to take away from this is that there is a lot of potential with generative AI, potential good and potential bad. But what it ends up actually looking like, what products end up dominating the market, what governmental policies and court rulings will impact its availability and integration are all still very much up in the air. But that said, we as librarians have a responsibility to get ahead of this continuously emerging technology so that when our patrons come to us for information, we can meet, if not exceed, their expectations. And that if there is a potential benefit to our community members in having access to this technology, that we find a way to make it accessible, while of course simultaneously taking into consideration our obligations towards privacy, security, and accurate information. And so with that, I think my next slide's the questions one, but you might want to jump ahead.
That's right. Remember that.
Sorry, that's my
for the
thing.
question time.
And so with that, I'll now pass it on to Nicolette, who's going to talk about the AI within SLAAs.
Thank you, Chris. All right, Nicolette.
Thank you. Is that a good distance? I'm Nicolette Buffoni. I'm the LSTA coordinator and library development manager for the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. So definitely less than Chris in terms of my expertise in AI. I'm just a curious person. I've read a lot, I've tried out a little, so I am going to talk a little bit about how AI might be intersecting with you all at your state library agency and your LSTA work. You can actually kind of skip this slide. Keep going.
Yeah,
Great.
sure.
So in Rhode Island, we are uniquely positioned within state government in that we are in a department alongside the IT department. So we end up with a front row seat to the process that the state has been going through to build a policy and consider how AI might be used across state government. So Rhode Island is looking for ways to incorporate what they call everyday AI. So this is nothing earth-shattering. It's simply ways that the state can leverage AI to improve efficiency, streamline processes, and generally make life easier for both workers and the public. Unsurprisingly, the state is incredibly risk-averse when it comes to implementing this. So there are a few concerns that are at the top of the list. First, the state doesn't want to break trust with the public. There's a lot of fear and skepticism around AI. And so it is approaching this process very slowly and methodically and thoughtfully. They also don't want AI to result in any state job loss. And finally, their, I think, biggest concern is data security, so ensuring that our state's data remains secure and also that it is not being used to train other AI models inappropriately. So once that is all taken care of, easy, we'll have achieved AI readiness and we'll be ready for some kind of implementation. As yet, we have not achieved AI readiness, and so the state actually does not have a policy in place yet. I recommend for all of you out there to check in about your state's policy or its development if you haven't already. These conversations are certainly happening at your states as well.
But for now, next slide, there's no state policy stopping me from using AI in my day-to-day work. So, like the state, I am considering how everyday AI can make my life and my work easier, while also trying to apply a certain level of caution. So since I submitted these slides, I just wanted to add one new kind of wild idea that I heard, which is I heard about a grant project that is considering building their own chatbot with the data from their project. And I was just kind of noodling on the idea of what if we could all build a chatbot trained on LSTA subaward project reports so that prospective grantees can ask questions about grant projects that have already been funded. So this is so far beyond my capacity as a professional as to be unthinkable, but I think it sounds really cool, and I give you this idea freely, and anyone may steal it and build it if you like. But on to how I have used AI in my work, really for two very simple purposes: brainstorming and wordsmithing. Tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, other chatbots can be great for those things. I will feed rough ideas into the systems and get new ideas back. So this can be for things like fine-tuning learning objectives for a training, translating complex sort of government speak into plainer language, and also for really small things like come up with a clever name for this conference session based on my description. I've also used ChatGPT for writing help, so sometimes just I ask it to write emails for me, or to change the tone, like please make this very angry email sound less angry. Never actually used that one, just a wild example from my imagination. Last year I also tried out ChatGPT while I was doing my SPR. So the number one top tip I have is you can use it for your word counts. So if you, like me, have trouble getting your abstracts and activities to under 160 words, you can do that now in literal seconds with a chatbot. I might also have a chatbot break down a large, like 2-page paragraph from a particularly wordy grant report into discrete activities with bullet points so that I can review and revise those more easily than having to parse it all out myself. And I've also put in activities under a project and asked the chatbot what connections it can find between those activities to help me write better abstracts or fill out the other outcomes not already reported section. Sorry, I don't know if Emily and the research team are here. I know that's not best practice for outcomes-based evaluation, but it works. So whatever I'm doing, I'm typically starting with my own ideas, my own writing, or a grantee report. And I always read the results and check them for accuracy, and I continue to edit and revise them and make sure it's my own work. It helps speed things up, but it doesn't replace thinking or subject matter knowledge or actual work. So next slide. Similarly, our subawardees are possibly using these tools when they're writing grant applications and grant reports for you, I think is the big thing. So this development, like anything, has some positives and negatives. Some positives, I genuinely believe that ChatGPT makes bad writing better, or any chatbot, sorry. You are less likely to receive applications that are with grammatically incorrect sentences, wild punctuation, misuse of vocabulary, like wonky spelling, if it's gone through a chatbot. Using ChatGPT as a brainstorming tool can strengthen grant applications by bringing in language consistent with an RFP or a NOFO, just like you would advise people to do in a regular old grant writing workshop. So negatives. ChatGPT is just a tool, so as I mentioned, it doesn't replace thinking or subject matter knowledge or work. I like to use this example. Before I worked at the State Library Agency, I was an elementary school librarian and technology teacher. I would have students write book recommendations in Microsoft Word, and apparently no 8 to 10-year-old child knows how to spell the word definitely. They all want to use the word definitely. And the particular way that all 8 to 10-year-old children misspell the word definitely leads to spell check providing only one choice, which is not the word definitely. So the number of students who turned in work where they said they would defiantly recommend Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief was truly staggering. So I coined this as, and I actually don't remember, defiantly, definitely principle, which order I put them in. You still need to proofread, and you also kind of need to know how to spell the word definitely in order to successfully use spell check in that scenario. And so anyone is going to need to proofread and also have good ideas to successfully use a chatbot or AI to help them with a grant application. Someone asked me, right, what can we do about libraries who don't understand what their community need is, so neither does the chatbot, so what they get back and turn into us is hot nonsense, right? How do we fix this? In my opinion, right, don't give them a grant. is always an option. You could hold workshops about how to identify community needs, offer people the ability to turn in a draft, or meet with you during office hours to discuss their ideas and other fixes. To discuss their ideas, and then other fixes that you would apply to the problem regardless of the existence of AI. And at the very least, you should, in some way, communicate to prospective grantees that if their ideas are not good, then a chatbot is unlikely to help them secure a grant. Next slide. All right, so that brings me to my last slide about communicating about AI with colleagues and your libraries, and also potentially providing training, which I know a lot of you are already doing. So I did not invent this framework that you see on the board. I actually saw this as a small part of a presentation at ALA, so the details are on the slide if you want to learn more about it. But these 4 D verbs have been really easy for me to remember, and they've stuck in my head since I saw them in June. And they've really helped me frame my thinking about AI and how I might communicate to libraries or plan effective training opportunities. So I think it's a good place to start your thinking on AI if you haven't started thinking about it. So the first one is to demystify. So that would be that AI is not magic, it is science, and we can understand how it works. And understanding how a chatbot works or any AI means that you won't have unrealistic expectations of what it can do. Next is demythologize. So you have AI enthusiasts on one side painting this sort of post-work paradise where we are all people of leisure and our basic needs are met. And then the reverse, AI doomers who think Skynet is coming and this will be the end of humanity. And the truth, at least for now, lies somewhere between those two extremes. And you should consider the actual positives and negatives of AI to understand how you can and should use it. Next, there is demonstrate, as in AI requires demonstrable skills to use it effectively, and you can teach people those skills. So someone mentioned to me last night they're doing a workshop on prompt writing for chatbots, and that's a skill, and practicing it will help users get better results and be more effective if they're using AI. Finally, democratize, wherein we exist in a society and we must apply this technology ethically. I think Chris covered this quite thoroughly, but questions like, how can we protect privacy? What about plagiarism and intellectual property? Is the data training the models biased? Yeah, probably. Will paid chatbots mean that wealthy people have access to better, more accurate resources? Yeah, probably. And so I just want to end with very similar to how Chris said it is, that these ethical questions around AI and everything that Chris has talked about, they really intersect beautifully with library values. And so I think as a profession, we should be paying attention. And I think as individuals, it's useful for everyone to be learning about it and trying it for yourselves, and also figuring out how to navigate this for ourselves and the states we work for and our libraries and their communities. That's the end. And then we have some slides, or some questions. Sorry.
Thank you both for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Dennis.
So now you all are going to take 7 minutes. I'll start the timer on my watch to discuss these questions at your table. And then, like I said before, the people who have been kind of pre-selected to help lead the table, if there's more than one of you at a table, if you could sort of spread out and try to find a table that needs a leader. So I hate to wind down these very active discussions, but we have more topics to cover, and we want to get to those too. So would anybody like to share some impressions or things that was discussed at your table? I know that we've got some active chat, so maybe we could start there. Cindy? Some highlights?
Some folks have said, that they think it's great for SBR reporting to use AI helping write letters of support, brainstorming. One state wrote that they are under a moratorium on the adoption and use of generative AI. And that's a state policy, obviously, not specific to their library. I'm pretty new to the position. I don't know all the answers yet.
Yeah. No problem. And we can circle back while you digest more. Yes. All right. Any in-person table discussion share outers? Broadcasters? Town criers? All right. Ah, Denise over here.
So it sounds like we have a few who are all in and trying to make it work around consistency and making sure that things, just a little bit of help with the paperwork and things that are repetitious. And then there's some other states who aren't quite sure. Some are pushing them out, some aren't. It's just a little bit all over the place, which, is kind of representative of the fact that we're all from different places, different regions.
Okay, Georgia, we just used a trial of Google Gemini, and I was able to use it for many of the use cases in a presentation. I was surprised at how much it helped, but you do need to use caution when requesting, when using the request in the bot. I just used it to summarize a bunch of open-ended responses that were in an Excel spreadsheet. It did it in 5 seconds, and it was super helpful. Our applications are narrative, so no AI here. For our narrative report, I kind of wish they would use AI. And I think I've been exploring ChatGPT and other services, including MS Copilot, which I think you have some experience with, Dennis. We've also used AI meeting summaries, as many have indicated. We found that there is still proofreading and accuracy checking necessary.
Certainly. Great. All right. Well, there's always a parking lot if something else comes up or impressions, but I think we'll move on to the next topic and bring up those presenters, which is Chris Gavreau from Connecticut, Karen Reish from Michigan, and Erica McCormick from Texas to talk about digital inclusion. Yay. Who's first? I believe Connecticut is first. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Hi, I'm Christine Gavreau. I'm from the Connecticut State Library. And I'm going to talk to you about what a small state and a small state library that's not particularly well funded can do around digital equity. The current digital equity project of the Connecticut State Library is modest, as you'll see, but I still think it's extremely useful. We're anchoring a project that's aimed at figuring out a way to assist small libraries, less well-funded libraries, and so forth, to find their way into the digital equity ecosystem. We're anchoring an IMLS grant that's pulled together 7 public libraries of various sizes, capacities, and catchment area demographics to develop a process for sharing a small pool of navigators across their sites and the various language communities in their towns. But before I talk about the project, which I hope will be of great use, as I said, to smaller and perhaps rural libraries, I want to note that as a state library, we came to this place of involvement and feeling responsible for helping libraries find their way into the digital equity ecosystem only because of LSTA funds, in particular the LSTA ARPA funds, which allowed us to fund pilot navigation projects in 4 public libraries, and to anchor a digital inclusion network of libraries, agencies, and community partners that via monthly meetings with presentations, education, and discussion have kept the issue alive at the grassroots for public libraries and community organizations. You can move to the next slide. There we go. Connecticut isn't one of the states. You'll hear from others who get the majority of, who distribute the majority of digital equity funds in their state or distribute really substantive grants to libraries for digital navigation. We are not in that position, nor were we in a position to establish a big not-for-profit coalition along the National Digital Inclusion Alliance model. But we did, in some of those models have a direct impact on accessibility because they deal directly with vendors and philanthropists and others to deliver services. But we learned that a modest, relatively informal network that meets monthly with some educational content that presents updates on national and state thinking on digital inclusion was well worth our time. Each month, anywhere from 30 to 50 individuals from these many types of organizations come together, get a class, some analysis of what's going on in the world of internet access, share models of digital inclusion work, and find partners. For example, one of the original pilot libraries that got our first $100,000 ARPA grant went on to get city funding for a permanent navigation program with staff and space, and then leveraged that support into the founding of a city digital equity coalition with some actual power to help implement on a citywide basis. And they use this in our network to share their model with other small and modest-sized libraries around the state. The network has allowed accessibility nonprofits to find libraries who wanted to host their special navigation appointments, and so on. Sharing on a relatively informal basis keeps modestly funded libraries who are still trying to find a way into the digital equity ecosystem informed and inspired as they wait for the granting opportunities that have been promised. And leading this ongoing network has meant that the state library, are very visible in the digital equity ecosystem, and we've regularly been invited onto panels sponsored by other state organizations, and keeps us in a position where we can continue to advocate for the role of libraries in the fight for access. The group as a whole also provided a space for the libraries to come together who saw their role in the developing ecosystem as really elevating community voices. I don't know how many of you have been involved in your state processes, but it's a continual struggle to be sure that those on the ground find their way into the discussions about shaping digital equity plans. You can change the slide. So our current project, which flowed from these others, as I said, brought together just seven public libraries into a collaborative project to share navigators. We created a deliberate grouping of very small suburban town with larger town and city libraries. We brought together libraries who had substantive experience with navigation on their site with libraries who've never done this work. And of course, that means there's a great difference in capacity among the libraries in the group. In particular, this group brings together the Bridgeport Public Library, the Hamden Public Library, and the West Haven Public Library, all three of whom had very interesting navigation programs, grant-funded navigation programs for several years, with several very small libraries in the Naugatuck Valley who felt they had no capacity in the past to host navigation. The volunteer libraries were recruited out of experience with the Connecticut Libraries and Partners for Digital Network, digital equity work and space. We spent 6 months together sharing community asset mapping and an assessment of the need for languages other than English, and determined as a group how to prioritize navigator language skills. In the end, the libraries prioritized services in English, Spanish, Arabic, Haitian Creole, and Brazilian and Cape Verdean Portuguese. In the end, given the grant size that we applied for and the navigators we ended up being able to afford, we had to limit these choices to 3, and top of the list was Arabic. Because of the large number of Syrian and other Middle Eastern refugees in Connecticut, in this regional area. And to date, Arabic speakers have made up the largest group of residents seeking navigation and given us a lot of confidence in that choice. So the way this worked was that the library with the most experience and the most passion around digital equity volunteered to act as a hub for hiring, paying, and remotely managing the navigators, accepting the data, and hosting a part-time contracted navigator manager. 3 navigators were hired as contractors for 25 hours a week for 12 months. And in collaboration, the participating libraries agreed to an on-the-ground rotation of the navigators and a system for allocating the Spanish and Arabic speakers if needed at any particular location in the region. Navigators are free to meet and encouraged to meet residents in public spaces more compatible with their work schedules, bus schedules, and all those things that determine people's ability to access digital equity, training, computers, and that assistance to get broadband at home. The navigators, as in most places, I'm sure, but it was very important for us, were hired based on the demonstrations of their ability to help folks without patronizing residents. Everybody went through exercises, challenging exercises, and all of the navigators they ended up having incredible technical skills, but out of that pool were people who really just liked helping and had a lot of respect, came out of the communities involved. The navigators come together in a peer group to solve problems once a month, but can do it more frequently if they need. The directors from the 7 libraries come together monthly to discuss and make corrections to the process and to help each other figure out how to advance outreach for the program. We have flyers and posters to advertise, but most residents come to navigation by word of mouth, or they're recruited by community partners selected and by each library in the process. In one case, it's an adult education group, in another, a refugee support group, another, it's a reentry group, a veterans hospital, or an immigrant rights nonprofit support group, senior centers, and so on. In the end, we're aiming for about 2,000 one-on-one mentoring exchanges, and most importantly, out of the experience, winning new towns and boards and other stakeholders to see navigation as a critical service for which they should provide funding for libraries soon. And of course, as the state capacity grant process rolls out, in Connecticut, I don't know, in every state it's different, but in Connecticut, the subawards will be organized around regional educational centers, and we hope that this model of regional sharing among small and medium-sized libraries will be dispersed and discussed, and it will help prepare libraries to apply with partners and work through these regional centers to secure capacity grants for 4 years of digital navigation. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. All right, we'll move on to Michigan with Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Reish. I'm the old school person. Right now, the Library of Michigan, the technology consultant position has been empty for several years, so we don't really have this embedded as something that we're trying to do directly with consultants. So what we're doing more is trying to push it through the subgrants and asking the community libraries, what do you need? What can we do? If all we can do is push money to you, what does it look like in your community? And our current grant program that's running, we have 2. We've stopped our small subgrant one for a little while, but we have 3 priorities for our year-long Improving Access to Information grants. They can ask for $5,000 to $25,000. And they can ask for something that relates to literacy, something that relates to historic preservation, or something that relates to digital inclusion. By a large margin, literacy is more of an issue for the libraries, but 15 of the grants that we have given out since 2019 have been for digital inclusion. 14 have been to a public library. We also allow academics to apply. 1 has been to an academic library. And it was 3 rural locations and 12 urban locations. And to put some perspective on this, the rural locations obviously have very similar needs to low-income urban areas, but I suspect I'm speaking for all of the states. The backbone infrastructure is so poor in the rural areas that they can't step onto local infrastructure and then distribute devices that the low-income urban libraries can do. I have dealt with a fairly angry rural library director who's like, why do you want to give me hotspots? Most of my service population can't get a phone signal. So I know I'm speaking to all of you with that. So it's the 3 rural locations is not that our rural libraries are less interested, but that there's less basic capacity there. And that's a struggle when we're working with our libraries and saying, do you want to do digital inclusion? And they do. Their communities need this badly. But for a lot of our communities, this is beyond what the state library can do, what the individual library can do. So next slide. So you can kind of see it in what they're interested in doing. We've done 3 Wi-Fi extension projects for 2 rural locations in 1 low-income urban area. We've done 8 laptop or device lending programs. Those were all in urban areas. There has been disability and neurodivergent patron support. I've been glad to see more of this recently, but that is also more in the urban areas where they have more basic infrastructure to build on. And there was 1 remote access for programs in an urban area. But I am seeing a shift. Like I say, I feel frankly very guilty that I'm saying I have money if you can do something, because we just don't have the staff at the state level. But I think a good comparison for how our libraries are trying to move forward in their communities, predating this particular grant program, we gave Menominee County, I really shouldn't name the library, we gave them funds for several years to do Wi-Fi extensions. At the time, this was 2018, there was 1 public Wi-Fi accessibility place in the entire county. I understand it was at a bar, which is not really great for K-12 children trying to do their homework. She spent 2 years working on the grant. She went to each of her townships. She had determined if she did an extension in each of the township halls in the county, that would put free Wi-Fi available within 6 miles of everyone in the county. 3 of the townships refused to participate because the township boards did not see the point. And she basically came to them and said, I have the supplies, I have the funds, just let me put it in your township hall. We fast forward a couple of years into ARPA. Kalkaska is a county that is a little bit inland from Traverse City, so it's a little bit closer to a well-funded, almost urban area. It's quite a resort town, but also very poor. He did, the library director there did a Wi-Fi extension. The surrounding townships, which had no library service, went, that's really nice. How do we get on board? And he said, sign a contract with me to provide library service, and I'll put a Wi-Fi extension in your township. So it was a distinct shift in the communities. I was super happy to hear that. So next slide. So our lessons learned, I think, again, I'm telling you nothing you don't already know, is that for low-income urban and rural areas, they're still on the basics. They're still on, can you get access? Do you have a device you can do your homework with? Do you have a device that you can sign up to for job applications? And the internet accessibility is still really difficult in urban areas. Having a direct connection for the K-12 school doesn't help people who work all day and can't access the K-12 school's network at 8 o'clock at night or don't have children. The support for disabled and neurodivergent patrons has primarily been a middle income or affluent area issue. And I think that is not that there is less interest in the low income in rural areas. I think it is that they are still dealing with levels of service that are truly basic. In the more affluent areas, they have less of a need to have staff spending time checking out hotspots and explaining to someone how to use a tablet, and then they can then focus more on other underserved areas of their populations. The support for remote access programming was from an affluent area, and I think that's kind of a holdover for those that were like, everyone at home does have access, so I don't have to come to the library. And that's much less of a focus for our rural areas. But overall, despite this covering a 6-year period from pre-pandemic through to now, the focus really is still on basic services. There's many people in many of these particular libraries and across the state as a whole who don't need their public library to provide them with digital services. But there's many who do. Even in very affluent areas, there are families who are low income. I live in a neighborhood that you can pick 4 different internet providers, and you need $100 a month for the cheapest one. So there's a lot of people that live near me who do not have internet access, despite the wealth of providers, supposedly. So I think about exclusion and inclusion with equity, and it's both a capacity and a money issue. Some organizations and some areas have that step up. It's true in so many other issues that libraries work on. And then they can focus on more one-on-one services. And then some of our other communities, they're still working on those basic building blocks. And I think we're going to be there for a while.
Thank you. All right, now we'll move to Texas with Erica. All righty.
I'm Erica McCormick. I am the LST coordinator for the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. We are in a state that cannot use, or that is strongly discouraged from using the word inclusion. So we have to use opportunity. So, so next slide, please. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our latest foray into helping in the digital opportunity world. And when we talk about closing the digital divide, we can say that. We're talking about broadband availability and affordability, digital literacy skills, device availability, affordability, and technical support, online privacy and cybersecurity, fitting right in there with that new requirement, and then online accessibility and inclusivity of public resources. Now, to do all these things, we need to have a team. Next slide, please. So we have now a digital library digital opportunity team, LDO. It has gone through many iterations that used to have inclusion, and you could have, anyway. We used to have technology consultants. Now we have a digital team. This team is funded by, I'll get a little further into this in a minute, but we applied for and received close to $9 million as part of the federal infrastructure bill. $6,000 of that is going to be going to library grants. The other close to $3 million will go through the administration, so we have 3 people. Henry Stokes, who was our previous technology consultant, but he is the program coordinator. We have Promise Madhu, who is our data and project coordinator, and we have Warren Davis, who is our community engagement and outreach coordinator. And they're going to be, or they are tasked with broadband funding, training, tools, research, and digital opportunity news hub. So they have come on board this year. Well, Henry's been there the whole time, but Promise and Warren are 2 of our newest hires. They came on in the spring, and they have been hard at work creating dashboards and all types of other online tools and traveling throughout the state, seeing what's going on. And one thing that they've done, next slide, please, as part of their baseline determining where they need to go throughout the state, we do a speed test of the public libraries in the state every year. And so you'll see on here from 2016, barely, I won't say 5% of the libraries in the state even met the FCC standards for broadband. But fast forward to 2023, and we're almost up to 50% who are actually meeting those standards. And so one of the things that they're going to be doing, I mentioned funding, they're going to be, let's see if we need to go forward or not. No, not yet. Okay, sorry.
Just kidding.
So the grant that we're going to be offering, we're not really sure when it's going to be released. The funding that we have was for 5 years of funding, so our funding will end December of 2026. Warren, Henry, and Promise are the first 3 to be hired out of 5 positions that are being funded by the funds. And like I said, this is from the federal infrastructure grant, and it's through our comptroller's office as our broadband development office. And the grant is going to be called LIFI, so we're talking Library Infrastructure Facility Improvement Grants, and there's going to be 3 phases: assessments, coaching, and funding. We just finally got the contract through to do the assessments. The goal was to have the grants starting by now, but we can't find a grants administrator right now. It's been a little revolving door. Everybody's moving up, and so their grants administrator, which will be doing nothing but their grants, will be part of my house of grantsmanship and accreditation. So we're hiring that person. There's one other position that they need to hire. But they're going to, and so at this point, we hope funding will be released in the spring after we write the NOFO. And since it is a different funding structure, I am going to have to learn that as well as keep on track of LSTA. That should be interesting. And so that's the grant. But then we go to the tools. We're doing Cloud for the libraries. We're doing the training. We will be doing, going around the state, doing training as well as virtual training. We also have research. Next slide, please. So as part of our ARPA funding, we did offer digital navigator grants as well as digital literacy grants. The one on the left here, Texas Public Library Serving Communities to Enhance Digital Literacy, that was ARPA funded, and I do have a copy at my desk that I think I need to leave with Cindy because I do not believe I gave you a copy when it was done. So, but if anybody else would like a copy of that research study, please let me know because I will send you double copies. And then we have this other research on the right-hand side, which was for the digital navigator grants that were also funded by ARPA, but the research was done after the fact. Next slide, please. And then digital literacy programs. And let me say one thing about, you may have noticed the classic graphics. We started with Rosie the Riveter and transformed her into You Can Do It and all those, and just transferred into the technology side. So we have a thing for World War II graphics. I do not know why. But anyway. So I just had to put a shout out for that. And just wish us well on getting our staff fully funded and fully warm bodies in. And like I said, we should have the NOFO and the staff on hand, we hope, by December, with the grant going out in next spring. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right. Now let's spend some time at your tables. Your discussion leader people have the questions in front of them to guide the conversation. And I will reconvene share out at a certain time. Smart, engaged attendees and LSTA coordinators. It is time to share any insights or questions you may have about this topic, both virtually and in person. Anybody want to share anything that they were discussing or maybe questions they have? We have one.
Nobody's saying anything, so I figure I'll say something here. Our conversation on this one centered a lot around with ARPA funds and CARES funds too, but mostly ARPA funds. We went into these really rural areas and we gave them this great stuff, and then the money ran out, and now they're like, wait, where's that great thing? I had Wi-Fi, and now it's gone completely. So, you know, great. thank everybody for the money. It was great, but you introduce them to something and then now it's gone and the citizens expect that service and got used to that service. So a little bit of a challenge there. Another conversation we had in literally in every state sitting at this table, the gap is literally as serious as, great high-speed internet access available to everybody in the community, and then you go down the street to the rural area and there's literally no running water.
Yeah.
So huge gaps, literally in all of our states that we talked about here.
That's good. Thank you for sharing. That's helpful. Oh, City's got some virtual thoughts. Mm.
Georgia is looking to create a digital navigator group. Digital equity is a huge issue in Illinois. And Katie McDonough from Delaware chimed in and said that she believes that it's not just about rural libraries. I think we can agree on that. But it's rural libraries are required. She said, I don't think it's just rural libraries that are less likely to take a chance on something new. Idaho, many gaps, but now each state has a digital equity plan, and we're ready to dive in and address those gaps. Some states have had some luck, some states haven't. One state commented that they tried a digital navigator pilot within our digital literacy grants and only received one request, and they did a mediocre job. So they decided not to continue. And another state is trying to partner with a state agency in charge of broadband, and we're starting to see funding and assistance come to libraries.
Great, thank you. Any other in-person sharing things? Okay, well, thank you all, and thank you to our wonderful presenters for this topic. And now we're going to bring Maura Walsh up to talk about, you can take your time, it's not a sprint, to talk about their experience with working with other federal funds. And then after Maura, we will invite virtually the Idaho State Librarian to talk about their experience with other federal funds. It's okay, take your time. You got the whole table to yourself.
I was trying to escape.
Right. Oops, spoiler alert. Take your time, take your time.
Shutting down instead of
Is it
starting.
really? It's one of those forced updates. The worst possible time. That's okay. Do you think maybe Stephanie could go while you?
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, are you out there? Or would you be ready to discuss? I don't know who's beaming her in. I don't know who's. Okay. Well, oh, there's Matt.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can. Thank you, Stephanie. Don't look at these.
No problem.
There we go. Every time. All right, we can hear you, Stephanie.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Bailey-White. I'm the state librarian at the Commission for Libraries. Dennis, if you want to go to the next slide. Our state library agency focuses mostly on library development and support of our talking book service. Next slide. And we serve about 850 public, school, academic, and special libraries, including tribal libraries in the state. Turn my video on here too. Next one. And so recently we have had 3 additional funding sources that have really complemented our LSTA funding and supported the LSTA funded programs and services and our strategic plan. So one of the projects that we've received funding for is capital projects funds. That's construction funding from the Treasury Department. And we received about 3.5 million that was awarded to about 15 public libraries in our state, ranging from $5,000 to help with ADA accessible restrooms to $500,000 that's helping build a new branch in a rural community. And that money, some of you may say 3.5 million is not very much. That's a drop in the bucket for California, but it's a big deal for a small state like ours. I always say some funding is better than no funding, and we've been really happy to accept that and get that out to the library community. We also were successful in receiving funds, ESSER funds, that's been able to go to out-of-school and summer learning projects for public and school libraries around the state. 1.25 million was distributed to our libraries in the state, serving thousands of Idaho children. Next slide is the next big opportunity that we've been excited about. We were designated as the lead agency for the digital equity funding that's coming into all states. We took the lead in the planning grant and have worked with partners to develop a great state plan. I think we were the only state library agency designated as the lead organization working closely with our broadband office. They've been focused on the infrastructure part. We've been focused on digital equity, which like our friends in Texas, we don't call equity here, it's called digital access for all Idahoans. And then we are planning on receiving about $10 million in the next 5 to 8 years that we'll be able to distribute to not only libraries, but community organizations to help address the digital divide here. It's I think, been a big honor to be able to work with partners to develop a plan for people to recognize the role that libraries play in digital inclusion. And we're just anxiously waiting for those funds to roll in for capacity and implementation, and plan on awarding about 90% of those funds out into communities to help address those needs. Next slide, please, is the lessons that we've learned. It's been really important for us as a small state agency taking on some of these big grants and making sure that the funding is spent appropriately and helps with our mission and serving Idahoans. So we typically have a lead project coordinator that works closely with our grants officer and our fiscal team to ensure that we're meeting all of those different federal requirements. I think a side benefit has been us learning and how much we appreciate LSTA and the folks at IMLS. They have everything so well organized, and different agencies do things differently, so trying to figure out how best to work with each of those different federal entities. But we rely on our LSTA policies, expand those, and make sure that we have everything lined up for all the reports that we need for each of those entities. We also have to navigate some of our legislative issues. In Idaho, all of our federal funds still have to go through our state legislature. They're not always thrilled about spending federal funds, so that can be a little tricky. And then we have to consider our staff capacity. We have a staff of about 35, but we didn't have anybody, for example, who had a deep expertise in construction. So for that particular construction grant, we outsourced that, contracted with Library Strategies to do office hours, webinars, and an in-person training and a toolkit, all based around construction areas that we can continue to use into the near future. And that's been kind of a way that we've dealt with some of those deficits in what our staff can do, knowing that we can't do everything. Next slide. A few other lessons learned is just building those positive relationships with our other funding agencies, getting to know different federal program officers, attending all the office hours that they offer, and webinars and training like the one that IMLS is sponsoring today, trying to get a handle on that knowing that their response times may be delayed, things are going to be different than you're used to with LSTA, partly because they're kind of building the airplane as they fly, getting these new programs off the ground across the nation. And then also working with our local partners, we were able, for example, with the ESSER funds, to partner with another state agency on an evaluation process that kind of benefited them and us, and not having to reinvent the wheel. As long as they were evaluating that program, they could also do the library component, and that's really helped. Next slide. And just a few of our outcomes. It is not always easy to work with these different federal sources, but I think the outcomes have far outweighed, the benefits far outweigh the wading through the bureaucracy. We've been able to do over $4.2 million in subgrants to 335 different library entities in the last 2 years. That's huge in building capacity for libraries to better serve their communities. We also sometimes provide materials instead of cash grants. We're going to be doing some laptop distributions. We've done that as a pilot program with LSTA funds the last 2 years, and we're going to expand that with the digital access funding. We do a lot of kits, from teen mental kits to mental health kits to podcast kits, for libraries that don't always have the capacity to wade through the purchasing process and do big grant programs. Sometimes it's just easier to provide the materials and turnkey programs for them. And then really aiming for long-term impacts. Even if it's a 2-year ESSER grant, there's some long-term benefits with strategic planning, with professional development, with toolkits that can continue to serve the library community well into the future. And then finally, last slide. Again, having a statewide plan that we can rely on, knowing that some of our funding sources, funding seems to follow other funding, getting your foot in the door and showing that you can handle some of these bigger federal grants has led to other trust building, and our governor's office and others know that we do a good job and support our willingness to take on some of those other programs. And then finally, just stronger partnerships statewide and at the national level, again, with our friends at IMLS and others, and that's going to really help us build our capacity and further our goals and mission. So that's it from me. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you to whoever made it possible to hear her and see her. Thank you. So I'm going to swing back to more slides now. So flashback. Don't look too closely at these, not yet. Okay, go ahead, Maura.
Here we are. Hi. So when I started developing this, I thought that the grants process was kind of like, or can be like, Russian nesting dolls. It's a little bit exotic, it's intriguing, perhaps mysterious, but in the end, everything should fit together. A long timeline to develop your application and your plan is ideal, but that's rarely real. The first thing you want to do before you even think about a grant is to make sure that your grants.gov and your sam.gov accounts are up to date, and make sure that they're actually yours, because they might belong to another organization, the ones that you have to use. So then we can start with our Russian dolls here. Start with an idea, maybe based on what you want or an opportunity that you've seen, and try to be as specific as possible. You will want to research the NOFO, or the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and these can be really complex documents, but here's where your IMLS experience will come in very, very handy, because most of the federal money is going to be almost 100% the same as IMLS, with some, differences like being able to make capital improvements sometimes and that kind of thing. You need to check, when you first look at the NOFO, I think that you want to check eligibility, deadlines, and requirements. to make sure that you actually qualify before you start putting a lot of work into it. Define your need, and when I say define your need, I mean with data, and then use that data to tell your story. Next, I think you need to get your team assembled, and I consider the team your own experts. I would use them to brainstorm for input, and then you can divvy things up and assign different duties for different parts of the application to different people. And again, I'm describing an ideal world, you know, which doesn't always happen in this order or quite as nicely, right? I think you want to create a program that is tailored to your specific community. In our case, it's going to be tailored to our state most of the time, but within that, you can also have something that is tailored to specific communities or distributed geographically and things like that. So you have a certain amount of leeway in your proposal. It doesn't have to be one size fits all. Sorry, I lost my place. Oh, seek community support. So you can design a great mousetrap, but if the people aren't willing to catch mice, it's not going to do you any good, right? And then think about the outcomes that you expect or hope for, but also keeping in mind that sometimes you get different outcomes, which is neither better nor worse, but you want to be open-minded and flexible about it. Build a project timeline that closely matches the available period of performance and expect that you might need to start later, and you want to keep a cushion of time on the back end. In a perfect world, you would be able to do both of those things. Make sure that when you're doing this plan, you are making sure that you know exactly who is going to be responsible for the different sections in that. I think you always want to work with a template. Be careful about allowable things, which can vary from grant to grant. Don't put anything in your budget that isn't in the plan. You should be able to draw lines from one thing to the other. I would also say you should always ask questions instead of making assumptions about what is allowable or how things can be done. Check your math, and then have someone else check it again. And have someone read your proposal who isn't familiar with it to make sure that it's really clear, and try to be open-minded about accepting edits and suggestions from other people. I think that lots of times we have such ownership over our creation that it's hard to be open-minded and willing to let other people make suggestions. Or at least for me, that can be a problem. Okay, next. So this is what the reality looks like. These are all federal entities, platforms that, what's the word I want to use? Tools that we've had to work with over the last year for about 4 different grants. And you notice I don't even have LST or IMLS in this, right? That, I think that you need to be, we're both spoiled and also we're given an advantage because of our IMLS experience. But don't expect that you'll be able to contact a person to answer a question, or even know who that person is that you can contact, or even get an answer in any kind of timely way. And that's, you just have to roll with the punches on that. That's why I say that we're really spoiled, because we can always reach out to our program officers here and get answers. So you have platforms, you'll have deadlines, you'll have logins for each of these. You'll have meetings that you can go to or not. And as our colleague from Idaho said, I would encourage you to go to everything that you possibly can. I think that the reporting is also a huge thing because it's difficult sometimes to understand what they want. It's difficult to restrict yourself to what they want. I think most program reporting has become more and more streamlined, but you don't always feel like you're able to tell your story. But really telling your story needs to come at the beginning in your application, and then hopefully you'll able to achieve it. But most of the reporting that we've had to do recently has really been just the facts, ma'am. No. Anyway, I'm not even sure that I've included in here a complete list of everything that we had to deal with. And as I said, this is just the last calendar year. One thing that we had some success with was what they call congressionally directed spending, or a set-aside grant, which was formerly known as pork barrel or earmarked money. And I think that it's a good entry-level type thing for federal money, especially if you have any kind of clout, or if you have a congressman who's interested in libraries or in helping develop this kind of thing. We've been very lucky in this, and it really allows you to design the program that you want to do. And the program that I was talking about that we're trying to get funded now for the 250th anniversary, this is where we started with this. And we know we're on a list, but until Congress actually votes on it, you're not going to know, so yeah. And the interesting thing about this, too, is that if you do get one of these grants, it is then assigned to a different agency, and that's why I have in here that National, I think I have, do I have National Archives in here? Yes, National Archives, because the one we have now is funded through National Archives. So then you get a call from National Archives, and they say, well, it turns out that we have to do this because blah, 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 and they're not always exactly delighted that you're being added to their list of things to do, but oh well. Okay, so I think you need to stay agile. You could get an award that could be canceled, which is what happened to us with the ACP program, or you could get a partial award, which also happened to us with the ACP program. And I guess you could just say, no, we don't want that $600,000, just keep it and we'll do something else. But, you know, you feel like, no, we do want that money because we have a lot of good things to do with it. So then you have to be able to adjust and, you know, make it fit. Get that square peg. Anyway, next slide. Yeah. Last slide. Tried and true training. When I first started working at the state library, my boss said, oh, I think you should go for training. And I thought, well, you know, I've been working on grants in other agencies for a long time. I don't really know what you think I'm going to learn, but okay. And boy, was it a wonderful thing. So I'm a great proponent of training now. These are 3 different things that I went to, which I thought were all valuable in their own way. The first one, the Grants Professional Association, I think has a lot more to do with foundations, and they seem to prioritize freelance grant managers. They do have a federal track, so you could go to all the meetings that are about federal government. I've never been in person, I've only been virtually, and they seem to have a lot of fun in person, but yeah. That's held every year, I think in November, in different cities. The National Grants Management Association was one I found out about by accident last year. It was great. I'm planning to go again this year. It has lots of fiscal information, and it's always held in Washington, D.C., so they get a lot of great speakers who are part of federal funding. The last thing they had on the last day was a panel of about, I don't know, 6 or 7 lawyers that worked at different agencies who were answering our questions, which was invaluable because usually you have to pay for that, right? So it was really, really nice. Yeah, and it was, I think, 3.5 days maybe, really intense, lots of options to do different things. I didn't see any other library people there, but everything they had was applicable, I would say. And then Grant Writing USA is a focused 1 or 2 day workshop. They have the grants management side and the grants writing side. I've done both. The grants management side I thought was a lot more valuable to me, very intensive, lots of legal understanding and stuff. And I found the grants writing was kind of more frivolous. But they do these all over the country, so it depends upon where you go. You can go on their website and look, and then you can click on where they're going, and you can see who's sponsoring it. So sometimes it's the sheriff of such and such a county. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the timber is going to be there. No, so like I said, I've gone twice. I thought one was very, very useful, and the other not so much. And they also do a virtual version. So it's a good way to do it if you don't want to travel. Right, that's it.
All right, thank you so much, Maura and to Stephanie. So, all right, so we're going to have some time at the table to discuss this topic. It might be a little trimmed down to make up for some time. But yes, and then we'll have share out and then wrap up this session. Thank you. Any thoughts, any impressions? Virtual world is ready, as usual, with some ideas.
California is pursuing an AI-related war fish grant with some of our grants to states colleagues.
Ah,
And Georgia is looking at an NTIA Digital Equity Competitive Grant for digital navigators, like it keeps quiet.
nice. That's great. Any other federal funding people in person? Oh. Jennifer.
So it's been interesting talking to them about money that comes into Puerto Rico, especially with regard to disasters and things like that. And I was asking him about the level of red tape, and it varies a whole lot. Some of the funding that they got for Hurricane Maria got pushed down the road and pushed down the road, and then it was COVID and it got pushed down the road further. And so finally, I think that the time frame is run out on that, but it's interesting to hear that perspective as for money that comes in, you don't necessarily write a grant for, but you still have to manage it and you know, a little bit like our ARPA funding, but we still have a lot of say in how those funds come in.
Yeah, well, that is interesting. Thank you for sharing. Oh, here's Jennifer.
I was just going to say, since you're about to close out, our conversation was working with all these other federal entities for grants. It gives you a whole new appreciation for our
That was the point of this whole conversation. It's the whole reason why we wanted to talk about it. Okay. Well, if that's everything, thank you all so much for your participation, and thanks to all of our states for preparing the presentations. Thank you so much.
Great job, states. Great job. Woo. All right, I'm going to do lightning round wrap up. So this is the time. If you have not yet filled out your survey, it is in your packet. I'd love you to take it out or use the QR code and get a digital version of it. Fill it out while I'm talking. We can multitask here. It's cool. So, and digital folks, I know you're getting the link to the survey. If you're still with us, we appreciate you. All right, so tell us what we need to know, and the next year we'll rinse and repeat and do it better. The appreciation wall was a huge hit, so let me just read out some of those as you're filling out your surveys, and if the multitasking's too much for you, it'll be on the recording later, and we'll make sure you get your appreciations. The first is, thanks, Ben, for coordinating our Wednesday night Dan excursion. It was great. Erica from Texas. I have a second sticky note that says, thanks for organizing a phenomenal dinner, Ben, and somebody seconded that. Then we've got a thanks Ben Miller for his advice on preparing for our site visit from Janelle in Vermont. Yay. And then thanks to Maura Walsh for her Spanish language help at dinner, also from Jeanette in Vermont. Thank you, Wendy and Maura, for handling the gift exchange. So much fun. Mary R. Wendy Copland, thanks for still being here for me, even though IMLS broke us up. Now, what this means is Wendy used to be Jeanette's mentor, and then at a certain point we decided Jeanette had graduated, and so she didn't need Wendy anymore. But when I first read this, I've got to admit, I thought it said, even though IMLS broke us, like we had broken you down. So I'm glad it wasn't that. No, we broke you up, but you can still be friends. Yes, all the soul crushing. We've got one that says, Wendy SC is a great mentor. Don't we know it? And Maura is awesome. Yay. And Catherine is so kind and knowledgeable. I appreciate her experience and her ability to set my mind at ease whenever I have questions. So nice. Thanks, Karen Reish from Michigan, for all the help trying to select a GMS, a grants management system, from Dina. Then we have more systems. Thank you to everyone who shared info about their subawards and grants management systems as we embark on the subawards journey. That is New York. Then we have some IMLS ones. I'm not going to read all the IMLS ones. If you shout it out a program officer, I'll make sure they get it directly. But we think of the peer-to-peer wall as, our accolades can come in the surveys if you have them, but we will share the ones that are more general. So, props to IMLS for hiring outside of the library profession. Great additions, and welcome to Lisa and Clifton. That's nice. Thank you to Clifton for the invitation to stand as needed. Yay, that was nice. All right, here's one. I'd like to amplify Nicolette's point that the way IMLS administered its designated ARPA funds and the way libraries utilize the funds is an outstanding example of why libraries are a smart investment. Hear, hear. Great amplification. Okay, this was a question that showed up on the parking lot a little after the fact, but it says the LSTA coordinator's email listserv is so helpful. Is there an archive, and where can I find it? We don't actually know the answer to this question. Does anybody in the room know the answer to this question? Because we can email Oregon and find out, and then we'll have Oregon blast that to the listserv. We'll find out. Then just a few scenario props. Madison, Cindy, and Dennis get Emmys for their scenario performances. They sure do. Thank you to Madison, Cindy, and Dennis for providing so much joy and light through the scenarios. You took the scary monsters down and made my day much cheddar. That is adorable. It doesn't have attribution, but we love it. And then I'm going to land on warm cookies, exclamation point. So thanks for that, Mr. Matt Burdetsky and hotel staff. All right, so we did our peer-to-peer wall. This is the racing sausages, by the way. Those of you that went to the Brewers game might have seen them in action. They are high-fiving their friends. We just want to thank again everybody who just presented. That was very brave. I thought it was awesome, and we appreciate you. There are some folks at IMLS who are kind of behind the scenes doing great stuff for us, and of course we had our acting director here in person, so thank you to them. And lastly, just a thank you to all of you. You survived our boot camp, you're still standing, and now we're going to send you out to be the best stewards of federal funds that you can be. We know you can do it. You have stayed engaged throughout these 2 days. You have been supportive and fun and laughed with us. And we know that you support each other in helping navigate not only the federal layers of grants management, but the state layers. You are an invaluable community to us and to each other, and we love seeing you, and we're sad to say goodbye. But we look forward to being together in person, perhaps in Puerto Rico next year. We'll see. Until next year, be well and safe travels.